Well, I wasn't kidding when I said I could talk for hours about Nier. We're still a year out before Nier Automata drops, so I want to talk about the first game's hero, the Father, known by default as Nier. Naturally, there'll be massive spoilers ahead. To refresh, Nier is set in a world following the collapse of modern society, where mankind is preyed upon by shadow creatures called Shades. The remains of civilization have reverted to a pseudo-medieval lifestyle. On top of that, a deadly incurable plague called the Black Scrawl threatens to thin out humanity's already dwindling numbers. Our main character is a father who is searching for a cure for the Black Scrawl to save his daughter Yona. Before I continue, allow me to bring up the most confusing part about this character. In Japan, there are two versions of the game, Nier Gestalt for the Xbox 360 and Nier Replicant for the PS3. In Gestalt, the character Nier is a middle-aged man and Yona's father. In Replicant, Nier is a young boy and Yona's brother. According to series director Yoko Taro, the younger Nier was meant to be the canon protagonist, but plans for international development were concerned that a skinny boy hero wouldn't be popular overseas, and thus the older father Nier was conceived. Many on the development team were satisfied, but Taro was still attached to the younger Nier, which led to the development of two separate games, Gestalt and Replicant. The script is largely unchanged between both versions except for how characters refer to Nier and Yona. Interestingly, the international version of Nier features the father in both versions of the game, simply retitled Nier. Since I never really got to play Replicant, and I like the father better anyways, I'll be talking about the father primarily, but I also want to draw parallels to the brother so you can see how it affects the character differently. The father himself doesn't actually have an elaborate backstory. The only thing you learn about him is from an optional DLC chapter, and all it really reveals is that Nier's wife passed away from the Black Scrawl shortly after having Yona. The only other things we can discern about him are from the ways he interacts with other characters and the rest of the world. The town treats him as the resident shade hunter, as he is the only one who ventures out of town to actively hunt shades. He's also something of a problem solver, and many townsfolk ask him to help in trivial tasks since he's the kind of guy who just can't say no to someone in need. He is caring and considerate of others, and he is especially protective of Yona. So far, he sounds somewhat typical as an RPG hero, but remember that Nier's two recurring themes are contrast and duality, and nothing is as it seems. While the father doesn't express these themes as wildly and as pronounced as Kaine does, his depth is conveyed in more subtle ways. Outfit-wise, he certainly looks the part of a post-apocalypse warrior hero, and it sort of serves as the baseline for what other characters look like. I mentioned this only briefly last time, but one of the more outward ways that Nier is an unconventional hero is that he's old. This probably doesn't come as a surprise to us Westerners because we're used to having adults as our heroes, but if you think about Nier among the landscape of other Japanese games, having a middle-aged single father as a hero is a daring pitch. One that was eventually backpedaled on, but you get the idea. But even among the herds of gritty adult cool guys, Nier stands out for being, well, ugly. I mean, I don't know if this is just the in-game model failing to adapt the art style, but he is not attractive. And I think it actually gives him character. He's a single father struggling to raise a daughter in a dismal world full of eldritch monsters. He's been through some shit. In fact, for as much as he loves his daughter Yona, his interactions with her are sparse and awkward. He spends so much time as a warrior hero that he has no idea how to talk to his daughter, who loves him unconditionally. And yet he's willing to do anything for her. Slay giant monsters, form a pact with a talking eldritch book, eat her cooking. Anything. It's telling that the father version of Nier was the version intended for international release because fatherhood as a core character concept is something we've only recently chosen to explore in video games, whereas Nier dropped this bomb back in 2010. I would be content to accept Nier as a monster-slaying hero whose lifestyle makes it difficult for him to be a father and end this analysis, but there's more to this scowling, dog-faced man than I first thought. I began looking for other ways in which his character is expressed, and unexpectedly, I found it through his animation. At first, I didn't think much of the game's animation because I knew Cavia wasn't a big-budget producer, and I was fine with the animations just being okay. But then I took a closer look and I noticed something interesting. Take a look at his attack animations. These look bad. Not bad as in badly animated, but as in he fights poorly. His footwork is all over the place, and he can't even keep his weapons level as he swings or thrusts with them. Look how he swings the big two-handed sword. The sword is swinging him as much as he's swinging it. He looks like he has no idea how to use a weapon. But that's when it hit me. He has no idea how to use a weapon. This man has spent years fighting shades to save his daughter, and he's not even a trained fighter. Maybe he's not the warrior hero he appears to be. Maybe the town just designated him as the Shade Hunter because he's the biggest guy in town and he can swing the hardest. Nier's sacrifices and hardships become all the more meaningful when you realize that he's not even qualified to do this in the first place. Looking back on it, even his armor looks haphazard and amateurish, compared to the suits of armor worn by the town guards, as much as it doesn't help them. The only thing he knows is how to hit things as hard as he can.
Less thinking, more killing. I like it.
The father demonstrates a dangerous disregard for tact and reason. He doesn't have skill or practice. All he has is determination, grit, and a magic book that lets him kill stuff. He doesn't care that he can't swing a sword right, because if no one's going to save his daughter, then who is? And not just his daughter either. Nier sticks his neck out for his friends, for the townsfolk, even for complete strangers in need of help. And maybe it's because he is a father, but he is also naturally his party's moral center. And given how each of them are fucked up in their own unique ways, boy do they need a moral anchor. By contrast, I feel the brother fails in many of these areas because, like he's advertised, he's just your typical pretty boy hero. Yes, growing up in a dismal world as a pair of orphans is also tough, but the father's sacrifices define him more than the brother. The father's lack of tact and training stems from his desperation, his willingness to put his life on the line on a task he's clearly not ready for. In context of the brother, his lack of technique just comes from inexperience, and it makes even less sense that the town would treat this skinny kid as their shade hunter. Yes, you could also construe that the brother is also risking his life on a quest far beyond his scope, but this could also simply be naivety and ignorance, that he doesn't know the risks, compared to the father, who has lived long enough to know how dangerous the world is and still chooses to face it. There is actually one thing that suits the brother more than the father, and oddly, it's a gameplay element. Halfway through the game, there is a 5-year time skip, and after the skip, Nier expands his arsenal from one-handed swords to learning two-handed greatswords and spears. Within the 5 years, the brother grows from an adolescent to a teenage boy, so it makes sense that he would eventually graduate from baby swords to using big boy weapons. But the father in 5 years just puts on a mask. What was stopping him from using the giant swords and spears before that gap? Now, I guess because both games are pretty much mirrored, I tend to think of this more as a design oversight rather than a plot hole. But when it comes down to Yona saying dad or Oni-san, I think I'll take the father any day. Now, I could stop this video right here, but there is even more to the father when you remember the game's big plot twist. To refresh, the game reveals that the remainder of humanity are actually clones called Replicants, while the shades you have been killing this entire time are actually the souls of real humans called Gestalts, who were meant to reunite with their replicant bodies. Somewhere down the line, the shades have gone mad over time and instead became hostile and monstrous. Many shades, however, retain their humanity and express emotions like sadness, rage, and fear. In my Kaine video, this revelation gave more definition to her because she can understand shades, but refuses to acknowledge that they are human. The father, on the other hand, can't understand shades, and in his ignorance, he commits mass genocide on his crusade to save Yona. Until the revelation, he treats all shades as monsters to be slaughtered without mercy, and the shades find him to be terrifying.
If even one shade is here, then I have to kill all of them!
In retrospect, his attire now makes him look less like a warrior hero and more like a murderer, a relentless butcher who destroys everything in his path. This element is brought to a climax when he faces the game's final antagonist, the Shadow Lord, who is in truth the Gestalt of Nier. At the end of the game's first half, the Shadow Lord kidnaps Yona, leading to the time skip. The Shadow Lord plans to unite Yona with her shade, which is his own daughter. The father, knowing the truth, fights the Shadow Lord anyway. Listen to his dialogue.
You want me to understand your sadness? You think I'm gonna sympathize with you? I swore to protect my daughter and my friends. If someone puts them in danger, they must stand aside or be cut down!
He understands, but he doesn't listen. He's been killing for so long that even the revelation of his sins can't turn him back. There's no more room for a happy ending. All that's left is to finish the fight, to vanquish the Shadow Lord, and to return home with Yona in a world that is no less doomed than when the adventure started. Well, actually the world is more doomed because he ends up destroying the grimoires, which can bind Gestalts and Replicants together. So now everyone will eventually die to the Black Scrawl, including himself and Yona. Our hero, an unwitting murderer driven by desperation bordering on madness. Our villain, a literal shadow of the hero who tried to do the same. Two fathers, desperate for power, fighting for their daughters. Contrast and duality. Nothing is as it seems. And that's it for today's design shop. Let me know in the comments if there's any other characters you want me to talk about, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos in the future. Also consider supporting us on Patreon so we can continue making videos like these. I'm A.B.I, and I'll see you next time.